Let's talk about the posterior pelvic tilt and some stretches and exercises that can help out the posterior pelvic tilt. Now, I call them the old man butt because they kind of tuck your butt under like this if you have this posture type. Diane Lee calls them butt grippers. It is the opposite of your anterior pelvic tilt, or what is also called the lower cross syndrome, and there are a tremendous amount of videos on how to correct that, but a lot of people are asking me and wondering, how do I correct this posterior pelvic tilt? Or I should say, what are some good stretches and exercises for that? And that's what we're going to go over in this video. Now, I want to be clear about a couple of things before I go over these stretches and exercises. A posterior pelvic tilt is not a pain diagnosis, meaning this isn't a diagnosis you would give to somebody who is in pain. So if you are experiencing back pain, don't rush to these exercises is necessarily the fix for your back pain. I would get a thorough examination and try to find out exactly what's going on with you. Now, that being said, this posterior pelvic tilt does create more of a flat back type, and there are predictable stresses when you have a flat back type. There's more forces that go directly through the spine because it doesn't absorb shock quite as well, and that usually means that there's more pressures through the discs. And there are predictable muscular imbalances with this posture type. So that's what we're going to go over right now. The muscular imbalance with this, it's the opposite of your lower cross syndrome. So it's usually too tight sometimes in the front muscles. There are people that are like this here. So they actually don't need to do as much strengthening of their abdominal muscles. They definitely don't need to be doing crunches and sit-ups as much in through there. But they're weak back here. So they need to strengthen their back a little bit more. And then they're usually tight somewhere in the back of the hips. Maybe it's the hamstrings, maybe it's the piriformis muscles, because they're tucked under like this here. So we'll go over some good stretches and exercises, but again, I want to be very clear, if you have some issue going on with you, you might want to get that checked out first. Now, I don't want you to rely on these exercises as the fix, but it might be a good place to start. Okay, so for a beginner's, just a basic stretch, you could lay on your stomach and arch backwards. Now, you want to be relaxed. You're not necessarily trying to hold yourself up like this here. This is just to help facilitate a little bit of an arch in that low back. Somebody who has a more recent episode of low back pain that has a flat back type, a lot of times will feel really good with this because their pelvis is always tucked under in the other direction. And so this here will help put the stresses in a different, or put the forces in a different region. So you could also come on up if you feel okay with that and maybe do more of a stretch like this. Now you'll notice this is going to stretch my stomach muscles and I'm just relaxing, relaxing, relaxing. But again, it's putting the forces in another direction. Now, I also want to let you know that if you have more or increased pain, and especially after you come out of this stretch, if you feel worse, this might not be a good stretch for you because it is closing your spaces a little bit where the nerves come through. So anybody with sciatica, this could potentially make it worse. So just be careful. And also you're jamming the joints of the low back together a little bit with this one called the facet joints, or some people call it the facet joints. So you just want to be aware of that if it's making it worse. Some people with a more recent episode, or they haven't had a lot of back pain and they have this back posture type, this might actually feel really good to do this stretch. So again, we're here or we're here, stretching the low back in a different direction, creating a little bit more of an arch in that low back, and again, stretching those front stomach muscles a little bit. Okay, I had also mentioned that the backs of the hips, hamstrings and or piriformis muscles could be tight, the deep muscles in the backs of your hips. I've got something here that I like for people with that posterior pelvic tilt to lay on, and I'm going to grab a strap here and show you how you could stretch your hamstrings a little bit. You do not have to use one of these, but for that posture type, if you lay on a little bit of a low back support, it creates more of an anterior pelvic tilt as you lay on this. From there, I could grab my strap and we could just come up and stretch those hamstrings there. Hold these, be anywhere between 10 and 30 seconds. If it's really intense, maybe you have to come out if it's too much for you, and then you could go back into it and continue to work with those. Again, you do not have to have this, but I think that it could be beneficial for you. To stretch the piriformis muscle, it's just going to be, you could continue to lay on your back and you're gonna bring the knee towards your opposite chest. You're gonna hold on to an ankle right here and come across this way here. Some people will do more of a like pigeon type poses and things like that in yoga, and they'll do that. But the idea is where you want to feel it is right here in the back of that hip. Same thing. You're going to hold those for about anywhere between 10 and 30 seconds, and then you can repeat that several times if you wanted to. One of the most foundational exercises of all is something called a bird dog. This is where we bring one leg behind us. As you bring that leg behind you, you are going to be using your glute muscle here, but you're really stabilizing with these low back muscles as well. This is a great way to get a little bit of activation in these low back muscles without putting too much stress through that. Same thing, you could hold that for about 10 seconds at a time. Make sure you're a little bit engaged in here because you do not want to fall this way here. So we're here. And then some people will even bring that opposite arm out. If you notice that you're very unsteady, balance is extremely important for managing a lot of different postural symptoms and low back pains. So try to keep yourself nice and steady in through there. And that is called the bird dog. If you want to take it up just a little notch from that bird dog and get a little bit more activation, you could do something, it's called a reverse hyper. A lot of times people will use other machines for this here, but they're extremely expensive. So you might be better off using some kind of a bench or a box that you would have here. You're gonna let your pelvis, kind of where your belt line would be, you don't wanna be too much on the box here. You ever so slightly want your pelvis kind of right hanging off the edge of the box. Hold on to something, and then you're gonna bring your legs up. And you would hold that there. You could also do movement where you bring your knees back down to the box and then come back up. Same idea, maybe you hold those for 10 seconds at a time, or maybe you just hold it for 3 to 4 seconds, but you do 10 to 15 of those. And again, you're gonna be strengthening those low back muscles when you do this exercise. So a lot of times people with that posterior pelvic tilt, we said they're extremely dominant with the front stomach muscles, holding things like side planks. You've got much more surface area of your side stomach muscles, and they're much more protective of your lumbar spine. So holding side planks is actually more beneficial than doing crunches and sit-ups for a lot of people with low back pain and both postural syndromes, but especially that posterior pelvic tilt. They're going to benefit greatly from getting these side stomach muscles in here. You want to make sure you breathe while you hold this. You would hold it for about 10 seconds, come down for about 2 seconds, and then you pop right back, right back up. You hold it for about 10 seconds again, and then you would do this 6 to 9 times on each side. The hip flexor muscles often need to be worked with people with this flat back posture. So we could do some little knee tucks on a physio ball, or even some pike ups like these here. The knee tucks are gonna be a little bit easier, but as you do these knee tucks, you'll get a lot more hip flexor activation. And then the same idea, you would go for maybe sets of 10 of those, do 3 to 5 sets of 10. So there are some basic stretches, exercises for your posterior pelvic tilt. Of course, there are many more. I wanted to give you some examples of the fundamental exercises. I went over each of those fairly quickly just to give you a good broad overview, but I do have other videos. If you scroll through or check the links below, I will post some of our other videos that we have that maybe go into a little bit more depth of those same exercises. Thank you for your questions. Thank you for watching. And if you want me to make a video for you, or if you have any questions, just leave it in the comments below, and I'd be more than happy to answer those questions.